welcome everyone. Thank you for coming for part two of Paul Graeber's presentations on black and white photography. And I think this evening it's going to be the fun bit, isn't it? We're going to be messing around with some of your own pictures. So I think without further ado, I shall hand over to Paul. I suppose that if people want to know a bit more about you, Paul, then they can look at the first video. I think we can just jump straight in, can't we?
Yeah, I was planning to jump pretty much straight in. So can I firstly say thank you everyone for attending, and particularly thank you for those attending for a second week. Gluttons for punishment, but particular thanks to all of you who've submitted photographs. And I've ended up with 19, which is an ample number. And I better start just with a quick caveat. Firstly, I'm not a professional picture retoucher. I do know enough to get my own photos into roughly the sort of shape I'd like them to be in, but I'm not pretending to be professional. And in the interest of getting through a fair number of the 19 this evening, I'm not always going to be doing the final tidying up and polishing of a picture that I might do if I was going to put it into a competition or print it or anything like that. However, even though I don't think I'm going to get through all 19, I have, as someone who watched Blue Peter in their youth, been doing a little bit of work on them earlier, and I have got versions of all 19 that I prepared earlier. So what I'll do is, if it looks like we're running out of time, and I've only maybe looked at 10 or a dozen of them, I'll quickly take you through the others so you can at least see what I've done with them. And Ian's very sensibly suggested that what we might do afterwards is put on the forum a kind of before and after for each of them. That will require each of you to give permission to do that, but assuming you're okay with that, that will give a chance to do that. I've got one question which maybe we can use that kind of reaction hand wave thing just before I start. Most of what I'm going to be doing is in Lightroom. I'm going to be dipping into Silver FX Pro probably 2 or 3 times during the course of the hour. I have also got Topaz Studio. Is anyone interested in using Topaz Studio? Because if the answer to that is no, I probably won't bother with it. I'll stick to Silver FX as the alternative. So if you could use the reaction thing maybe and just wave or something, if yes, if Topaz. I can see Peter is waving. Anyone else?
Well, can I just say that I wonder whether we might just have a quick look at Topaz at the very least.
Okay, then... all right. I'll do it. I'll maybe just do it once. I also have only had it very recently, and I'm not that expert at it yet. And you'll see one of the ones I prepared earlier was using Topaz, and I'm not that happy with it, which is probably a criticism of my technique rather than the clever bit of software. Right, what I'm going to do in a second is share my screen, and we will be starting in Lightroom. I'm going to start off with a nice simple image taken with a pen F, I see, quite recently, and what I'm going to do is just, I will always make a virtual copy before I do anything, so that we can just go back to the original if we need to. I'm going to deal with this one in Lightroom. I've just realized I've got to get rid of all my pictures of you lot because they're blocking my access to Lightroom. So we'll do this one quite simply. The first thing I do before I do a conversion to black and white is I have a quick look and see if there's anything that, do I need to crop the picture? Not particularly, I think in this case. Is there anything really wrong with the exposure? Well, if you can see the histogram in the top right-hand corner, you can see it actually looks okay. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to do this one very simply. I'm just going to hit black and white treatment, and I'm going to come straight down to these sliders. These are the crucial sliders. The black and white mix. There is somewhere, there's an auto. I can hit auto, and that is Lightroom trying to decide what I might wish to do with them, but it's not going to be very good at it because it has no idea what I want to do with them. So it's not a technique I recommend. So if I hit, how do I reset that? Undo. Yeah, right, that's back to normal. These sliders are duplicated in most software that you might wish to use. If you don't use Lightroom, you will find them in Photoshop, Adobe Camera Raw, You will find them in Topaz Studio. You will find them, funnily enough, DxO. I don't know if anybody uses that, it's quite nice software. But in order to get the sliders, you need to buy the extra film pack, which I think is about an extra 40 or 60 quid, which personally I think is a bit of a rip-off because I think it should be included. But anyway, the basic principles are the same. And you may already have some ideas on how you want this to look in black and white, but I think the simplest technique is just to take each of these sliders. Do you see what's happening to the red in the picture? I go one way and it gets lighter. I go the other way and it gets darker. And the red is an important aspect of these flowers. I actually have decided I want that to look darker. So it's always the case, the color you're playing with, if you move it to the left, it'll get darker. To the right, it'll get lighter. Orange will be similar to red. And I think in this case, I really want to come the same way. I want to accentuate that contrast there. Yellow, I'm going to take the yellows down because a lot of the background seems to be influenced by yellows. And what I really want is the flowers themselves standing out nicely from the background. And the same will happen, I think, with green. Do you see how the background's darkening now? Instantly, do you see that those little patches of blue are Lightroom telling me I've now gone down to 0, complete black. In a color picture, I'd be bothered about that. In a black and white picture, not so much. It doesn't matter if you've got a little bit of true black and even true white in a picture. Probably these bottom ones aren't going to do much. Now, aqua's doing nothing, blue's doing nothing, purple, a little bit on purple, magenta. Right, okay, now I did mention I'm going to be a little bit quick and dirty with this. I could do a complicated tone curve adjustment. All I'm going to do probably for most pictures tonight is just go to this medium contrast and strong contrast and see what works. I think maybe medium's about right for this. But now here's a thing. Most of the pictures we look at tonight, I'm probably going to take the clarity slider and increase clarity. And you see how that's bringing the background? It looks a bit messy, actually. With flowers, you can actually produce quite a glow on a flower by going negative. Do you see? I'll exaggerate it, but you are now getting a glowy, negative clarity sort of a feel, probably a bit too strong, but I actually quite like that now. What else do I need to do to this picture? I might be able to deal with the bottom right hand corner where there's a rather light white blob with a brush, but let me see. I'm just going to do a post-crop vignette, which I have to admit I do to most of my pictures, and I'm going to take that out. I don't mind that black in this picture, and that's about where I think I'm going to get to in terms of the time available today. Just out of interest, let's see how it looked when I played with it earlier. I ended up there, and today I've ended up here. It's not dissimilar, actually, but you're making a series of artistic decisions. I decided I wanted those red colours darker, but you could perfectly legitimately have them lighter. There is no right answer, and that's why if I show you a conversion I've done before with one I've done now, chances are they're going to look quite different. But anyway, I think what we've done here is maybe just brought the flowers out from their background a bit more strongly. Going to move on, try and get through quite a lot of these. This picture, I noticed quite a lot of you sent me quite elderly pictures. This picture was actually taken in 2001 on a cyber shot, at which time it's probably not entirely surprising that it's a bit noisy looking. It's a bit dark and a bit noisy. So what am I going to do with this one? And certainly I just noticed the ISO is 141. I've never seen an ISO of 141 before. Never mind. We're going to develop. And I think the first thing we really need to do here is just increase exposure. We could have a debate about whether that dark image was actually what the photographer wanted and intended to create an atmosphere. But I think we need to be able to see what we're doing a bit more. So I'm inclined to increase it a bit here. And I will do this one again quite simply, and then we'll move on to slightly more sophisticated things further on. One thing that may be of interest is that if I go to black and white now, amongst all the sliders down below we were playing with, the white balance sliders also make a difference. So if I shift this towards yellow, it lightens it. If I shift it towards blue, actually it's lightening it again, but it's lightening in a different way. And similarly, both sliders will make a difference. I'm happy enough with it there, I think. I'm not sure I want to risk adding contrast this time because it is quite a noisy image. So we're going to keep that as linear. And then I'm going to go through the same exercise. Don't worry, the next one will be less. Oh, that I think is improving it. Orange going the other way. Artistic judgment going on here, no right and no wrong. That probably not much green or aqua, no, or blue, or purple. No, we've probably done the one. Magenta, no, not even that. Okay, where do we want to go with clarity this time? Maybe soften it again, actually. Faces often do benefit from just a little bit of softening there. And the last thing I'm going to do before I do something else, I'm just going to add quite a significant, in fact, I'm going to just take that in because bottom right is rather a bright area. Okay, I think there's quite a lot of character coming through in the face now, but what one's certainly conscious of is that it's very noisy. It's a 20-year-old picture, nearly. So what I'm just going to demonstrate, I'm going to edit it in. And here I need you to shout out if you don't see this happening, because sometimes within Zoom, if you change application, Zoom doesn't seem to follow it. I'm going to use Topaz Denoise, which I recently got, because it does seem to be pretty effective. And those of you who were in on the Andy Rouse presentation a few weeks ago, he specifically recommended it for Olympus pictures. Now, this happens not to be an Olympus picture. I'm going to use the automatic settings. I'm not going to take ages on it. And I'm going to go for high remove. Now, that's a bit too plasticky. I'll go back to medium.
It does seem to be working, Paul.
Sorry?
It does seem to be working.
It does seem to be working. Excellent. And you can see, I'm not going to enhance sharpness because I don't think sharpness matters much in this picture. And I'm just going to quickly save the image. And if we're lucky, it's going to come back into Lightroom and you will follow me back into Lightroom. Have you followed me back into Lightroom?
Yes, yes.
Yes, good. Okay. The only thing that seems problematic is that for some reason. Right, there's the noisy version. And there's the Topaz cleaned up version. I think there's quite a difference there. Is that something that's pretty much visible to people? Of course, I can't hear you because you're all muted, but...
yes, it shows nicely.
Yeah. I know there is noise reduction within Lightroom and you may be perfectly happy using that. But I have to say my early experiences with the Topaz software is quite worthwhile. Let's again, right, so that's where we started. That's where we've got to, and let's have a quick look at the one I prepared earlier, which is, oh, it's on the left. It's almost the same, isn't it? In this particular instance, they're quite hard to differentiate. I've done, yeah, maybe there's a wee bit more noise than the one I've just done. So two very simple conversions, one taking a very elderly digital picture and I hope making it look reasonably passable. And I think there's some character coming through in the face. If I'm honest, I'm a little bit disturbed by just how bright this area is and I might choose to just darken that a little bit, but I don't think it's looking too bad. Now, I can't remember who sent most of the pictures we're about to look at, I'm afraid. It's quite a lot of different people, but I'm fairly sure it was Fred that sent me this one. And I'm going to do something radically different with this one. Here we've got pretty much a record shot with a little bit of converging verticals as an issue in it, of a nice looking castle and tower. And what I'm going to do this time, instead of handling it within Lightroom, I'm immediately going to take it into Silver FX Pro. Ian or Randy, if you just confirm once it hasn't opened yet, but once it has, it's thinking about it. This happened to me earlier today. It's refusing to load. I'm going to have to quit Silver FX and reopen it. And then just repeat the exercise. It will work.
Was that the problem that you were describing?
No, not really. It's a different problem that just occasionally when you open something out of Lightroom, it can even happen into Photoshop. For some reason, it gets moody. I think it's working this time. Right. Are you now seeing a Silver FX Pro screen?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Good. Excellent. Right. So there are 48 presets available in Silver FX, and I will, because this is the first time we've done it, but you can see it's going to be very slow if I do this on every one. And so what I'm going to do, rather than go through them all, you can choose favorites, and I've got 4 favorited, and I will show you all 4. I think that's already quite nice. Wet Rocks is one that seems to work quite well, but I think the sky's a bit too light there. Dark Selenium, yeah, it's okay, but again, I don't like the sky. However, full contrast and structure, for me, that's working really pretty well. So I'm going to choose that. What I'm then going to do, there is a lot of adjustments you can do within Silver FX, and some of them are very clever, including local adjustments using something like control points. Because I don't want to spend time on that tonight, and most of it duplicates what you can achieve in Lightroom. There are just a couple of things I do want to show you, though. Firstly, toning, not toning. Yes, I do mean toning. I quite enjoy some of these tones. Do you remember we talked last week about the definitions of monochrome, and it's one color plus black or white? So these are legit. And I quite like selenium or maybe blue. I'm going to go with a strong blue on this one because I think it helps. I can then add a vignette just the same as I can in Lightroom, but they tend to be quite strong in, and I want it to be strong. I'm going with that one. You can burn the edges, which I rarely use, but again, I think what I'm trying to do is add drama to this shot. I've added a bit of drama there, I think. And the other clever thing here, but with a caveat, is it's got lots of good borders, but the borders cut into the picture. In other words, they're not expanding the canvas as you might in Photoshop. They're actually biting into the picture. And do you see the top of the tower is now clipping the thing? So I'm actually not going to do it, well, unless I can find one where it doesn't. Does it there? Yeah, I'm afraid it does. So I'm not going to add a border on this occasion. I will do it with another one. There are, incidentally, and I'm not going to do it this time, you can mimic dozens of different old black and white film types, and some of them I'm sure will improve this picture, but I'm not going to do it this time. We're going to go back into, we're going to save that. Fingers crossed, we'll be back in Lightroom in a second. Okay, we are. Right, what else does this picture need? Not a lot. I'm not envelop. I'm still thinking, I know we've added quite a bit of contrast, but will it take a further boost? Yes, it will. See, do you remember I said last week, don't be afraid of extreme settings? I am going to town on this picture. You are welcome not to like the result. Maybe we can unmute Fred when I've finished and he can tell us what he really thinks. Personally, I think this is quite a lot more exciting than that. But you are welcome to disagree. And I'll show you, I think this is fairly similar, but I'll show you where I got to when I did this the first time around, which is, can't find it now, I've probably gone sweeping past it. It's the trouble with having quite a lot of pictures here now. Oh, there it is. Yeah, that's where I got to yesterday. Do we want to unmute Fred for a second, as I know he took this picture? What do you think?
Hold it when I get there.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, a lot better. The judge actually had a go at it when I put it in a DPI. But,
I think it does just need a bit of drama added to it to lift it from being a good, a decent record shot.
yes.
There are also some converging verticals, which I tried to fix in Lightroom. I can show you actually. No, I can't. Need to be in
I'll
development.
get further back next time.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's right. Transform. If you hit transform, it'll do that. It'll straighten it, but unfortunately, it loses the top of the tower. So I'm sure in Photoshop you could get rid of the converging verticals. But I think for me that's a shot that's now got some power. And certainly, if I was judging it, I give that a pretty high mark. Whereas if I'm absolutely honest, I might not have done to the original.
Magpie Mine in Derbyshire.
Okay, yeah.
And
Well,
as soon as we left, about 5 minutes later, it absolutely threw it down.
which you couldn't tell from your original, could you? It looks like a nice, pleasant day.
It was.
My sky looks like it's about to throw it down. Okay, let's move on. Thank you, Fred.
Actually, Phil from Derbyshire was just saying that he could see there was some, well, he described it as pixelation, but actually I think there was some tonal breakup. That may be something to do with zoom, because we're not really viewing it at the best quality, but I don't know whether, Paul, you can see that. Top right hand.
What I would say, I'm looking, there's a bit of chromatic aberration, which I might actually be able to get rid of.
I think it's in the cloud structure in the top right corner.
You need to be a bit careful with Silver FX Pro, and it's a point that's well made by, was it Phil? You can very quickly go a little bit over the top. And it might actually be that if I'd gone into the noise reduction thing, I might have been able to get rid of it. But yes, you're absolutely right. Right. If we go into lens corrections, you don't need to enable profile correction if you're using a micro four thirds lens, because it's all built in. But removing chromatic aberration does work. I'm not sure if it's actually made much difference in this case. But
actually, Paul, I'm not talking about the chromatic aberration. There's a bit of ringing, yes. But if you look...
yeah, there's a bit of quality loss there, and I accept it.
The tonal gradation is broken up, hasn't it? Yeah.
Particularly around here, yeah?
Yeah.
It looks a bit odd, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I wonder whether my earlier version looked a bit odd. I'll quickly flip back to it. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? It's much the same issue. Yes, and it's a good caveat. I think you can get almost all you need to do within Lightroom these days. Silver FX is a nice shortcut to getting some really dramatic effects, but there is a danger associated with it, and I accept actually I need to do more work on the top right hand corner of this picture. Has gone a bit funny, but it's nice and dramatic, so I'll let it off.
I'm sure you could just soften it, and
yeah, there's things you could do.
I think it actually worked pretty well. It was just at one point, partway through your process, it suddenly appeared.
Yeah, it was probably when I did the, or was it while I was in Silver FX or in Lightroom? Can you remember?
I can't remember.
Okay, well, anyway, we'll move on with that warning. You need.
No, I can't remember.
Right, this was a picture.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. Thank you.
I immediately liked. I think there's a lot of merit in this picture. It's a bit dark, but maybe again that's kind of the atmosphere you were trying to create. But if you look at the histogram, it's way over to the left. And I think I will just start, before I do a black and white conversion, I will just start by lightening it. The other thing I felt was, even in colour, but I think still in black and white, I don't like that right-hand edge. I think it's a distraction. And I think we could at least come in enough on the left to get rid of that little stone, maybe a little bit further, without really harming the picture. So somewhere around there. Those of you who like to use exactly the same format, 4:3, 3:2, whatever, won't approve of what I'm doing because I usually use a free form. But right, something else I want to show you, maybe I'll show you on this picture. Those of you who are paying your monthly subscription to Adobe have access to these profiles. Those of you who've got old-fashioned one-off payment ones do not have access to them. They're really rather clever. And there are a whole heap of colour ones and black and white ones. And for obvious reasons today, I'm going to concentrate on the black and white ones. I'm going to pick one and then maybe we'll talk a little bit about why they're quite good. They're free, incidentally, so you might as well use them if you're... So you can just hover your mouse pointer over the various different treatments and pick one that you like. I like 8 at the moment. 8, I think, still. Well, that's a lot lighter. And then there's an old-fashioned blue, green, and red filter, and an orange filter, and a red filter. But I remember liking 8, so I'm going to click on 8. You can then vary the amount. One of the things that makes this better than a preset or a plugin is that as soon as you go to a plugin in Lightroom and come back again, you've lost all the history from before you went. So you can't change the earlier things. But these profiles are actually built into Lightroom and they don't suffer from that disadvantage. And if you have got an up-to-date copy and you've never played with them, I do at least recommend having a play. So I think I've got a start point I'm okay with. So I'm going to close the profile. I'm going to come down and do my usual black and white mix. I do want to lighten him a bit. I want to bring him out from the background a bit, not too much. And I think maybe the knees are just getting a bit bright. Probably the orange is going to help with that. Yellow's not, funnily enough, the yellow's doing very little. You can't always guess what's going to make a difference. No, it's not going to make any difference. Well, the blue, surprisingly, is lightening. I don't really want that lighter, so I'm going to go the other way there with that bottom left. Purple. Not really. And magenta, just little. Okay. What else do I want to do? I haven't yet decided whether to boost the contrast. This is quite contrasty. I think that's overcooking it, and I'm actually not going to do it. I'm going to stick with linear. I might give them more time, have a little bit of a play with the tone curve, but I probably do want to boost the clarity a bit. I think, actually, in this case, boosting clarity is helping the picture quite a lot. And I want to give us a little bit of a vignette, just darken everything down so we concentrate. Now, I think we've still got the atmosphere that was in the color picture. But I think in this case, we've done something that's really increased the focus on him. I might just darken down particularly his left knee a bit. I could do that, couldn't I? Let's do that. I'm just going to use a brush very quickly. I've gone a little bit too far. Doesn't really matter. Turn that O off. Just pull the highlights down on his knee and maybe the whites. Just, yeah, that's enough. For me, that's just done the trick. And would I lighten his face? I might just, let's just spend the moment doing that. The O on. Boost the size of the Lightroom now. Incidentally, when you do this brushing, it's quite clever about understanding where the borders are meant to be. So I'm not too often going over the border. What I might just do is just lift just that much. Do we like that? I do. So it's up to you whether you prefer the color or the black and white. But on this occasion, I think I do prefer the black and white. There will be some later on when I'm going to freely admit they didn't really quite work for me, but I think this one has worked okay. And I will now go back to the one I prepared earlier, which is there. I think that's that's rather lighter than I've ended up with today, but I did warn you I'm never going to be in the same place twice. So that was the one I did earlier. This is the one I've done now, which I think maybe has a bit more drama to it, actually. Is a photographer present? If so, if they want to unmute and comment, I'm quite happy. No, they don't, or they're not here. Moving on. One of the things I like about pictures like this and converting to black and white is you've got some nice decisions to make about what you do to the colour of the boat. That blue, you can either go lighter or you can go darker. And I think I'm going to do this one in Lightroom. We will be going back into Silver Efex, I think, fairly soon. I'll do this one in Lightroom. So back into develop. I'll just hit black and white. I won't use a profile this time. I've shown you where they are, and they are quite useful. One of the things I'm going to want to do is play with the sky, but I think first I'm going to mess with the black and white mix. Nothing's happening. Why is nothing happening? Ah, there's no red, but there is orange. I'm going to darken that because I want that foreground darker. Yeah, foreground a bit darker, I think. This might end up being an occasion where the one I did earlier looks a lot better, but we shall see. Now, the blue is making quite a difference there, and because I want the boat to stand out, I'm increasing the slider on the blue, which is lightening the blues. Purple and magenta, not doing anything, I suspect. No. Right, what else does this picture need? Well, I've now decided that's bothering me, so I'm going to crop it out. I could just darken it. But what really needs to happen is there needs to be more excitement in the sky. And my usual chosen way of doing that is to drop an ND grad filter. And it's very similar to what you might have done in the field if you put an ND grad on it. And what I will generally do first is reduce the highlights, which has only done a certain amount. I'll come down with the whites as well, beginning to get, I think this can take a contrast, but no contrast, actually negative, funnily enough, is doing it. Do I need to come down a bit further? Just reduce, yeah, the blacks. I'm just trying to add, you will remember, those of you who were with me last week, that I do quite like dramatic skies. And I'm just trying to add a bit of drama to that sky. We'll close that for now and come down to the boat. What does that boat need? I don't necessarily want to add clarity to the whole picture. The exposure's a bit dark, isn't it, still? I might just, well, that's destroying what I've done to the sky. I'm going to put a, shall I do it with a brush? I'll do it with a brush.
Paul, somebody just asked about the adjustment brush, wanted to know what it was. They may not be familiar with Lightroom, but it's just called the adjustment brush, I think.
It is, and I will, just in a second, I'm just taking off, I'd overcooked this. I'm just taking off a little bit where I didn't really want it. Yeah, let's cover that. If you can see my mouse pointer, there's a set of vital controls immediately under the histogram here, and the right-hand one is the brush. They're all useful. I used the ND grad filter for the clouds earlier. I haven't yet shown you, but I probably will in a picture or two, the radial filter. I probably won't be using much spot healing and cloning today because that's kind of finishing off the picture, and I'm not really too concerned about that today. But the brush is there. And once you've brushed an area, you can do all sorts of clever things with it. You can, for instance, absurdly increase the exposure or reduce the exposure or something a bit more modest without it looking artificial out there. And you can adjust all of these different factors. I'm certainly going to add some clarity there. I'm just trying to make the boat stand out from the picture a little bit more. There's also, and again, this is in the more modern versions of Lightroom, and if you're not aware of it, I wasn't really using it until very recently. You can adjust by luminance which bits of your mask are actually effective or not. So if you only want the darker bits, you can pull this down and only the darker bits of the picture are getting affected. If you only want the lighter bits of it affected, you can do that, and so the darker bits aren't getting affected, the lighter bits are. And you can even show, there's my luminance mask, maybe just showing, do you see how adjusting the range that the luminance mask is working on? This is quite clever. This is a really useful addition to what Lightroom can do. Oops, well, let's close it. Okay. I still feel that this area of the picture is quite dark, but I'm conscious of the time. We've probably only got another 20 minutes. I'd like to get a few more pictures. So rather than play with it more, let's go back to here's one I prepared earlier and see whether I did a better job on it earlier. I think I possibly did. I can't find it now, of course. Anybody see it? Oh, there it is. Okay, so there's the original. And I've actually got two. Yeah, I think that is better. Two very different ones. I think maybe one I took, now, this is the one I took into Topaz. And because I didn't know what I was doing, I've really made a mess of the sky. I wouldn't recommend that to you. So we'll take a different picture into Topaz. But I think this is I just did in Lightroom. And I think on this occasion, I definitely did a better job on it earlier. I think that's now quite a nice picture, actually. I'm not so convinced with my current effort. No, it's definitely not as good. Okay, I want to get through 2 or 3 more before I maybe just concentrate on here's what we did earlier. Really nice long exposure here, which I would suggest anyone who's used a Lee big stopper would recognize it's probably a Lee big stopper because you've got that blue color cast, which a lot of people complain about. I find it takes a fraction of a second to correct it in post-processing, so it never bothers me very much. But I think this is a good picture. I'm going to do my usual create virtual copy. And then I'm actually going to take this one into Silver FX. We'll cross our fingers that it opens first time. Yeah, I think it will. And because this picture's about rocks, I'm going to go with wet rocks. And I think that's already added a tremendous amount to the picture. I'm not going to do much else with this one. I've decided all the other changes I'm going to make, I can make in Lightroom, although there's a lot you can do in Silver FX. I should have done one thing before, it doesn't really matter, but before I took it into Silver FX, I usually do any cropping, and that bit of sky is really bothering me. And you could clone it out with the trees around it, but I don't think the picture harms any for just dropping that fractionally. Do you know, I don't think we're a million miles away. What I would like to have done and didn't was add a selenium tone, and I'm wondering whether I've got the means here. I have some other black and whites that I bought actually from Mark Klaskowski, some of you might have heard of, very cheaply, but I'm just wondering if, where's these black and white ones? Oh, they've vanished. Oh, it doesn't matter. I'll show you what I did with the selenium thing, because that is what I did earlier. We will forget that and go down and just, I think we can take, oh no, that's too strong. Even that's quite strong. I might just increase exposure a wee bit. Yeah, I think that's bringing it back to maybe where you want it to be. Clarity, yeah, I think that's aiding the picture, really bringing some drama out. Those of you who are familiar with Lightroom, those little red splobs are just saying it's overexposed there. And I'm just going to pull the highlights. It's not crucial. I don't think anybody'd ever notice, frankly, if I hadn't mentioned it. And I'll do my typical just a bit of vignetting. Yeah, it doesn't want a lot. Okay, I think I'm actually going to prefer the one I did earlier here. But I'm pretty sure the photographer's with us, so they might unmute and give me a preference when I found the picture, which I can't. Oh, there it is. Yeah. No, not that one. That one. Do we have a photographer? Hello.
Hello.
Do we have a... Is the photographer speaking?
Not owning up, I don't think.
Not owning up? Okay.
Hi, sorry, hi there.
Hiya.
It's just, sorry, I've got a bit too much background noise with my kids and my wife's hoovering at the moment.
Oh, right, okay.
So,
Okay, so that's where I ended up first time round. Quite a lot of drama in that shot. Do you like that? I might be inclined, actually looking at it, just to darken down this foreground rock a bit. But plenty of drama. Do you like it, or do you prefer the other one I did, or is the honest answer none of the above?
I think I prefer the other one.
Okay, we'll return to that. Slightly subtler. You prefer the subtlety of that one?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's a good picture. I'm enjoying it. I like that. Okay. And moving on, we have a wall. I think it might be another, yeah, not that old a picture, actually.
That's my one.
Okay, Ian. I'll create a virtual copy. I won't take that in. That's how we do it. Oh, God, we're at 3/4 of an hour. Okay. I think this might be the last one I do in detail. I will show you the others, but and I will just take it into black and white.
If you're interested, it's that was on Wharfdale.
Just come down to something really square. I think this can take, because there's a lot of interest in the wall, a lot of texture and so forth there. So I'm going to try a strong contrast on that. Then I'm going to do the black and white mix. There isn't any red in this picture, it would appear. There's a bit of orange. Now, do I want the oranges lighter or dark? The wall is to quite an extent orange. I'm tempted to lighten it a bit at this point. I might change my mind later. Oh, and the yellow's definitely making a difference there. Just bringing it out a bit. The greens, yeah, as you'd expect. Well, actually, it's that patch up here that seems to be mostly green. Aqua. Blue, oh yeah. So if I do that with the blues, quite dramatic, I suppose. It's just bringing a bit more out of the sky, and I don't think purple and magenta. There's a reason purple and magenta seem to be at the bottom of this list. They're very often the ones that don't do anything at all to your picture. Right, I still want to bring a lot of texture and clarity out of that. So the clarity slider's doing loads for me here. But I'm going to try the texture one as well. Is that, Ian, is that getting over the top, or do you still think that's kind of okay?
It's quite contrasty. It looks, it doesn't really look to me like it was taken with black and white film. It's more creative than that, and that's fine. I'm always interested in looking at what can be done with an image, and I'm perfectly happy with that. I think that one of the issues with converting from color to black and white is that you can basically have an infinite choice of results, and that's just one.
Yeah, of course it is. And I might choose to make the wall darker, actually. I think it looks, if you'd use black and white film, it looks like you'd had a filter on the sky, doesn't it?
Yes.
And that's, you know, that's perfectly okay. If I come down, are you happier with a slightly darker version of the wall, do you think?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, I'm not that fussy. I just love to see the different possibilities, and I might come up with a favourite. And this particular picture, I think you can do all sorts of things to it and still get an interesting result. If it was a portrait with a face, then you're more tightly constrained, I think.
Okay, well, that's a nice lead in, because I think what I'm going to do, because I've still got quite a few pictures I haven't got to, and I know I haven't really got the time to do in detail, I'm just going to show you some befores and afters, and I'm going to give my own comments on how well or badly I thought it worked, because it didn't all work well. Right, now we'll start with this one. Right, so there's an original. I think it might be yours again, Ian, is it?
Yes, that's at the Louvre in Paris.
Right, that had a lot of promise. I felt the top area of the picture was a little bit too light, with obviously windows light streaming through. And I did add, I think, a selenium kind of thing. I've done this one in silver Efex. You can tell by the fact that it's got a border on it, but also the border helpfully just cut off the top of the picture, and I don't think it did any harm there. And actually, I think this is, for me, this is one that works really nicely in black and white, or slightly selenium and white. You know, nothing wrong with the original at all, but I just think that's got a little bit more drama and impact,
Well,
personally.
if you remember, I sent you the raw, so the raw was basically unprocessed.
Yes,
so,
of course. Yeah,
so,
I'm not criticising your treatment at all. I'm just saying, you know, I can only compare it with raw, and I'm sure you've got a much more dramatic version in colour. But I think this is one where that mixture of shapes and tones and so forth is always going to work pretty well in a mono conversion. As the portrait's next to her, let's go straight to that one. Really, was this yours again, Ian? I can't remember now.
yes, I'm afraid this
yeah,
one was. Yes,
well, yours are all together in this selection. I think she's got a charming face, and my aims in terms of processing it were to make the background less obtrusive. Not that it's hugely obtrusive, because it tells you something about what she does, although I think the baguette in her hand really does that as well. So when I treated it, what I've done is I've slightly lightened her, I've darkened the background, I've even darkened the baguette a little bit. And I think this is a 50-50 one. You know, you might prefer that. You might prefer that. I think they're both perfectly okay. But I think darkening the background has just maybe helped it a little bit. We've done that one. We didn't do the one. Okay, this is one I might have chosen for the first picture. It's another simple flower picture. I'm not sure it's improved by being in mono, but what it has done is simplified the background, and I think it's standing out a little better from the background than the original colour. But I wouldn't make great claims for it. I don't think it's something that's necessarily brilliant. Let's go back. Other ones we haven't looked at very quickly. That one, I think this one's about the sky, really. It's quite monochromatic, which means it's not necessarily one that lends itself very well to post-processing into mono. That's where I got to. I did a bit of cropping, which is why it's a different shape. It's still really about the cloud. I couldn't bring an awful lot out of that pool in the foreground, speaking personally. One I was happier with, this one, I think it's a really nice photograph, and it works fine in colour, but I do think on this occasion I was actually able to bring a bit more out of it. To me, that's got a bit of drama, and any distraction that's caused by the colour of the rocks has gone, and we're really concentrating on his face. And I'll just go back very quickly. you might prefer the colour, but I think, I'm hoping a lot of people watching will actually prefer the mono there. That works quite well for me.
Paul, that's mine. And actually, I've got both colour and black and white versions on my website. I've never been 100% happy. I've got about 15 varieties of the black and white. Some which are quite dramatic like this, and some which are a bit softer. And I was interested to see what you would do with a picture that I've come back to many a time. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you may well, because obviously you've had time to do it, you may well have produced something that works better. But all I would say is I like this picture, and again, it's one I'd score quite highly if I was judging it. Okay, we have a coastal view. You know, nice picture, a little bit, and there's very high contrast. You know, the rocks are quite dark, the sky's quite bright, quite difficult to control. And where I ended up with is that I probably want to put this through the noise program. I won't do it now. Just assume you're looking at it looking a little bit less noisy, but it's not one I would claim is definitely better in black and white. I'm not sure it is. It's different, but not necessarily better. Now we did him. This is one I really struggled with. This is, I think, a silversmith, and it's quite a cluttered picture. It's very old. It's nearly 10 years old, taken on a D90 way back when at ISO 1250. And 10 years ago, ISO 1250 was pushing your luck even on a Nikon, I think. And I think it is a little bit noisy for that reason. So I've had a play with it, and that's where I got to. I'm not happy with it. Is it better than the colour? It's different. There's a different version. It's a little bit darker, but I think I'd probably go with the lighter version. But I suppose there's less distraction in the mono, but no right or wrong there. I think the boat we did. Now this one.
Oh, just to interrupt, Paul, I've got a question from Jo. She's asking, do you decide in advance how you want something to look, or just play until you get something you like?
By in advance, do you mean before I take the picture or before I start processing? Let's try and address both of those things. I sometimes think to myself, this will make a good monochrome picture, but my honest answer is most of the time I'm not making that decision until I look at it on screen and start playing with it. You know, and I think I mentioned this last week on, I think virtually any Olympus camera, you can have your view set to be showing you a mono image, so you'll know roughly what you're going to get, but it's not telling you what you're going to get from post-processing. A lot of pictures, when I am coming to process them, do I have in my head a finished image in mind? Generally not. I want to see what I can get out of it, and I'm generally, particularly with landscapes, looking to add to the drama. Yeah, my problem with this picture is I'm not a huge fan of out of focus foregrounds, and there's an awful lot of out of focus foreground here. So I had to remove some of that, but what there is a nice procession behind that of middle ground and background and quite a decent sky. So let's bring some interest out of that sky. And I think you might not like this, but I think I could claim you'd never know it was the same photograph almost. You know, there's the colour, and that's what I ended up with. And I think this has got some more depth to offer, some more contrast, some more drama in the sky. But as Ian pointed out a few minutes ago, of course, I'm dealing with people's raw originals. I'm not dealing with what they've done to it. And it may well be that whoever took this has done a brilliant job of their own. Right, how many?
Paul, that's mine.
Yeah.
And I did exactly the same and cropped it.
Yeah.
And I think mine wasn't as contrasty, but I was very exercised by the white line. I think it might be chromatic aberration, you see between the hill and the clouds.
This one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
the processing seems to emphasize it very strongly.
Processing almost, oh, yeah, and it is some. Let's go back to the color. You're right, and there are things you can do to get rid of that, and we don't have the time to talk about that now. You know, it actually does. Once you point it out, of course, it jumps out at you, but it hadn't bothered me that much.
Can I ask you, Paul? You've not mentioned grain.
I've talked a bit about noise. You're talking about film grain.
Yes.
Yeah, you can add film grain, and that's something that Silver Efex is very good at doing. And no, I haven't. And I have to admit, the reason I haven't is it's not something I play with very often, because I don't tend to try and mimic old film styles. I'm personally trying to produce modern black and white. There's nothing wrong with it, but I'm not very knowledgeable about it. So I'm afraid that's why. Do you want to say something about it?
Well, I was just going to comment. One of our previous speakers talked very much about adding grain to black and whites,
right,
to enhance their visual appeal.
Yeah, and maybe it's lesson for me. I need to go and have a play with it. But as I say, it's not something I've done much of. I did play a little bit with it, but I haven't done much with it.
Won't hold it against you.
Okay, I'm going to try and get through, because there's a couple here which I didn't think worked. Not this one so much. This one's a bit squiffy. That abbey or cathedral, whatever it is falling over a bit. So obviously I had to correct that. I've ended up with a slightly over-dramatized version, but it looks, no one would think it looks real, but it's got something to offer, I think. It sort of just brings out the abbey from its surroundings. One, I wasn't happy at all with my conversion. Here's a street shot. Wasn't quite sure where the photographer wanted my eye up with this one. And I've done a conversion, but I will not pretend that is any improvement on the original. I just couldn't get anywhere with it that I was happy with. I think there are only a couple more we haven't looked at, and this is one of them. Nice shot, this. When I looked at it, the thoughts that occurred to me was the area around the bridge is a bit dark. That needed dealing with. And this girl in red shorts, I found the shorts, as red usually does in any picture, were kind of jumping out at me and a bit distracting. And of course, that's something you can deal with in monochrome quite easily. And that's where I got to with it. And I'm quite happy with that one, actually. I'm not saying it doesn't need a bit of finishing off, but the girl is no longer distracting. The bridge is lit up a little bit. And there's quite a bit of texture and interest in the, I think we've actually done them all. In the building, sorry, I should have finished my sentence. I'm going to stop sharing, and if Ian is amenable, I know we've been going for an hour virtually, but if there are any questions for a couple of minutes, I'm quite happy to.
Yes, questions are very welcome. Does anyone like to speak up?
Chat's been busy.
Well, I use Lightroom mainly for my stuff. I think I've used Photoshop maybe once in my life. I've just got Affinity. I thought I knew Lightroom until tonight. I looked black and white, and I've really found it really, really good. Oh. Lightroom is a massive program if you know what you're doing, and I think you showed that tonight. Thank you.
Oh, it's a great pleasure. And look, I've shown you things I happen to know about in Lightroom. There's loads of stuff I don't know about, and I think that's true of almost everyone. We don't use everything, but the black and white conversion tools are pretty good, actually. You don't need, Silver Efex is a great little plugin, but you don't really need it if you're prepared to spend a bit of time getting quite similar effects, and you don't tend to end up with those sort of digital artifacts that you can get in Silver Efex if you push it too far. I apologize to the guy somebody wanted me to do Topaz and I didn't, and I'm quite happy maybe offline to have a quick chat or exchange of emails or personal private messages or something about that. So apologies for not going into Topaz, but we just timed out.
I see you had Lumina 3 on.
I did, and I spent about a week putting sun rays on everything.
But if you have Lumina 4, which I happen to get, which I happen to have got by mistake, disguising it,
Yeah.
as absolutely brilliant. You know, you've just got to watch where the shadows
Where
are.
the shadows are, yeah.
Yeah.
I know, it's very clever. There's nothing wrong with Luminar. I have decided, for better or worse, to stick to Lightroom as my principal. I've looked at some of the others, but it's partly an integration question. The fact my wife, who's also a keen photographer, and I use it. We use it on every machine. I've got Lightroom on my iPad now. You know, the integration from the phone and everything just works really well. And also, having been using it now for over 10 years, I kind of have a reasonable understanding. I'm just reluctant to relearn another program. Somebody mentioned Affinity, was it, as well as Luminar? Affinity is a pretty good program, but I'm just not going to spend the time learning it, I'm afraid.
Having looked at Affinity, one of the things I've found, and I noticed a lot of other comments about it doesn't do RAW conversions well, but the other RAW conversion program I've used is on One Photo RAW. Now, I've given up using it as a RAW converter because I can't really tell much difference between Lightroom and that, but it works fantastically as a plugin, and particularly in black and white, because when you're doing something like the boat, you can actually mask different parts of the boat, because you can load filters on top of each other like layers, as if you're putting filters on the front of the lens, but you can actually mask each individual part of the image off. And it's got much more control over that than I found when I was using Silver FX when the original version, before, I think it was about the time Google took it over and didn't do anything with it.
Yeah, there are other good programs that are available, and we all seem to have our favourites. And no one's mentioned Capture One yet. You know, they're all pretty good these days. I happen to be in that mindset which says photography is quite an expensive hobby. I can live with the 10 quid a month I'm paying to Adobe for a system which I understand pretty well and can have on all my machines, whether they're desktop, laptop, iPads, phones, whatever. And that's where I've got to. Having said that, of course, I have just splashed out on some Topaz stuff. And I don't know whether any other denoise users here, but my early experiences with it, without even trying to understand it properly, have been pretty good. Anyone else using Topaz denoise?
No.
No.
I'm a Darktable user, and the latest version of Darktable, I've been absolutely astonished at what it does with the noise. It's really very, very good, and that's free as in free beer. But mine was the beach photo. I was going to ask a question about that. More general question: do you find in converting to black and white, it's better to have a contrasty image or a softer image?
In some ways, a softer image, because it gives you more flexibility. I'm almost always going to be wanting to add contrast to it, but it's easier to add it than take it away. But I think these days, you know, you can pretty much go any which way. So I think a softer image is perfectly fine. I think when I looked at your beach image, I immediately thought, my goodness, the contrast levels here are really high, and that may make it more difficult to work with.
It was quite an old image. That was E3, probably 2009-ish.
Yeah, I can't believe, out of the 19 pictures, whatever it was I got one from 2001, one from 2006, and about 4 from 2011.
One thing I'd like to say is that you managed to remind me personally that black and white isn't just black and white. Black and white can mean some subtle tones, and you can get blacks which are still black, but they are actually not neutral. So you can have a cold black, you can have a warm black, and I'm not even talking about sepia. You can have blacks which have their own quality, and they're still black. And that's something which I think is important to emphasize. And I think with the black and white tones that you can apply in most software now, that's definitely worth exploring.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, if you're intending to print it, that's going to make a difference too. You're going to print it on a matte paper, an art paper, a glossy paper, because that's going to make a difference to the way the blacks look. So yeah, it's a huge subject.
Can I ask, do many people here use or intend to use the filters in the camera to produce black and white out of camera rather than sort of doing it on the computer?
Well, I've seen some quite good results with one of the art filters. What's it called? It's dramatic tone, I think, isn't it? Which adds a lot of grain and contrast. And I suppose one area of black and white that we haven't explored here is extreme contrast. So lithographic type of reproduction. That's another option.
Yeah, and I can make a comment about the dramatic tone filter on the Olympus.
Sure.
If you try and use it and then fiddle with the exposure compensation, it does have some very strange effects. It's actually an interesting thing to play with while you're doing it.
I think art filters can be very fun, interesting to play with, and they shouldn't be dismissed as a gimmick. I've seen some great things done with them.
Can you, if you're using art filters, can you sort of still retain the RAW? If you save RAW and JPEG, you'll get both out of the camera, is that right?
Yes, that's right. So the RAW is completely untouched.
Okay.
I've done the same with Ian. The dramatic one's the one I played with when sort of honking around old, ruins in Sicily and places like that. And yeah, it's quite interesting, but I always keep the RAW.
The other thing is that you can also use some of the art filters quite effectively in video mode.
Oh, right. Didn't know that.
Yeah, my view is, it goes back to the conversation we had last week about the Leica monochrome or whatever it's called, where the camera is doing the black and white in the first place, and you then have no control over how that gets processed, how those colors get processed. Whereas if you're watching tonight, you'll see, you can make the reds lighter, the reds darker, the blues lighter, blues dark, and so on. But if the camera's made that decision for you, and all you've got is a black and white JPEG to play with, then you've lost that ability.
I suspect that they would also output black and white sort of 14-bit or something like that. So you've got more tonal range, but as you say, you've not got the colours.
Yeah, and there's no doubt, we'll not have the discussion again, there's no doubt that Leica is capable of very high quality output. It just doesn't leave you with the flexibility of playing with the colours.
Yeah, and a Leica photographer would, with some justification, say, well, it challenges my photography in a different way, and it's all about what makes you creative, and there's no right or wrong. It's a perfectly understandable point of view.
So does a box brownie.
Yes. So I think we've covered a lot this evening, and I think we've come to a natural conclusion. So once again, thank you very much, Paul. I think that was a great success. We've had 2 sessions. Everyone's giving you the thumbs up. Yes, we've got virtual thumbs up as well as real thumbs. So
thank you, Jeremy.
that's great. And in terms of the next online session, as I think you may have noticed, we have our next guest, but I just have to sort out an actual date, so I'll be announcing more on that shortly. Thank you very much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the rest of your evening, and thank you, Paul, for an excellent two-parter. Thank you very much indeed.
Great pleasure. And I hope everybody enjoys having a little play with black and white after watching me for a couple of hours.
Actually, one parting question, if for the people who are still here, is there anybody here that had no interest at all in black and white beforehand and is now actually a bit more, well, even a bit more interested? So we've got James. I can see James holding his hands up there.
Yeah,
and
because I'm slightly colourblind. And it helps.
Right. Well, yes. That's very interesting. Excellent. So you've even converted a few.
I have a photographer friend who, he's a Canon guy, but he is colourblind. And if he, in the old darkroom days, he would have to get his twin sister to come in from next door to check his colours before he printed anything, because he's red-green colourblind.
Yes, ever since my wife passed away, because I used to bring her up and say, what about these colours? Now I have to get one of the other guys in the camera club to come round and have a look.
Yeah.
I think it'd be easy to go black and white, I think.
You've got time for one last quickie?
Yes, I then got a question for Ian as well.
Oh, right.
Go ahead.
If you're post-processing and you know you're going to be doing a big print rather than perhaps just on screen, does it affect the way you process?
Yes, a bit. I will tend to be subtler if I'm going to produce something I'm printing at, say, A3 or above, than something that is basically going to be looked at on iPads, phones, whatever, because you're really looking for more of a, the wow factor when it's looked at small, and I will probably go to more extreme ends. If I know it's only really going to be projected or looked at on small screens, it's partly my own prejudice of being more into prints than PDI, but I will take more care over something I'm going to print. That doesn't entirely answer your question about whether it'll be processed hugely differently. I think it'll just tend to be a little subtler.
Oh, that's fine. Thanks for that.
And my question to Ian is, I can see people have been chatting, and because I obviously didn't have time to look at the chats, do we lose that chat history for all time as soon as the call gets in?
No, I get a copy. I think everyone gets a copy of the public chat. They may not get the private chat.
But I don't remember ever getting it. Could you perhaps send it on to me?
Yes.
Paul,
Yeah?
whilst the chat is still there, if you go down to the bottom right, you can file it yourself.
Bottom right of what? The chat? Oh, I
Chat.
see the file. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I think I've still got the chat from the first one, so I can send that to you as well.
Okay. It doesn't seem to want to do it. Doesn't seem happy filing it anywhere. But look, if somebody could just send it to me, it's probably going to be easier.
Click on the three dots and it says save.
Ah, I'm hitting file. I need to hit save. Okay, let's see if that works. Do you know where it saves it?
You got a Mac? No idea.
Look, let's not hold up 30 people here. We'll sort it out.
Having saved it, it says show in folder, so you can click on where the folder is.
Not on mine, it doesn't.
It's in the
show in Finder. Yes, it does.
A Zoom folder.
And okay, all right, I'll figure it out. Thank you for that.
Let's just chatted something else. Got to go, David. Okay, yep. David, we're going to. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to close things down now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye all.
Bye.
Thank you.